Good afternoon or good evening, English 11 students. Today you'll be listening and viewing a PowerPoint lecture. And with this lecture today, I would like you to take Cornell notes and use the Cornell note-taking method. You'll need to get out your composition notebook. You'll see on this slide that I've given you all the pieces to what goes into taking Cornell notes. You will need your name, hour, and date in the upper right-hand corner. You need to title it. You can title it SAT Reading Test. Draw a line down the page, about an inch over from the line that already exists on the page. And to the left of that line, you'll include headings and questions. To the right of the line, you'll include the lecture notes. On the very last page of your notes, down at the very bottom, you will want to write a summary of today's lecture. So in just a few sentences, sum up what today's lecture was about in your own words and paraphrase, okay? Well, let's get started. So the lecture today focuses on the SAT reading test. So I'm going to unpackage this test for you so that you can understand the magic behind it. So then once you get there and you're at your desk taking that SAT reading test, hopefully this lecture will help you better understand it so that you can master it. Okay, first I would like to talk with you about the format, and I'll try and go slow so that you can take notes. So first of all, test format. It is exactly 65 minutes. That's how much you get to basically read 6 passages. So there are 52 questions total to be answered with those 6 passages, and it averages about 10 to 12 questions per passage. And so on average, that's about 75 seconds per question. So again, there are 6 passages. 4 of those passages are completely individual. They're isolated from each other. They vary from topic and genre. And then 2 passages you'll find are paired together. They are related somehow. Maybe it's topic or thematically they're related. And then you will find that there are questions that are asked where you have to compare and contrast those 2 passages. Now, the reading of those passages, you're looking at about 500 to 750 words per passage. So actually, that's fairly short. And then the genres, we find that typically there's one passage that has to do with U.S. or world literature. So you might read, for instance, a portion of the Declaration of Independence. Usually you find that there are 2 readings, 2 passages that have to do with history or social sciences, and then 2 passages that are maybe based in science. You will find that there is one passage that is fictional. So it's some sort of fictional story that you must read and then analyze the author's purpose, tone maybe, the characters, and make certain, inferences and analyses about the text. So that's what I have to tell you about the format. Pretty straightforward and simple. Now I'd like to go through the 8 different question types that we find get paired with these passages. So you'll want to take notes on this. There are 8 of them. So, and it's important to maybe be able to recognize these different question types. And then that way you know what is being looked for and what answer you might need to provide when you can recognize that question type being used. So the first kind of question type are big picture questions that ask you, what is the main idea or main point of the whole passage, or maybe a particular part of the passage. But in general, it's like, what is the main idea? What is the main purpose? What is that overall idea of the passage or reading? The next type of question are little picture questions, as I like to call them, or little details, where actually, usually within the question, it will tell you what line they want you to actually go to and where they want you to find the answer. So it's a detail that's going to be there sort of in black and white for you to pluck out from the text, and then you can answer the question. But obviously, having that line number included is really helpful. The next type of question, which is inference, goes up in level of difficulty. So they might give you a line number to say, go to this particular line, but it requires you to do some guessing or hypothesizing or make some sort of inference where you can kind of like read between the lines and be able to come up with an appropriate answer. And it definitely makes you use your critical thinking skills. The next type of question is a vocabulary question. Careful on this one. Oftentimes, students, they might see the word that they're being asked to like provide the definition for or the synonym for, and they rush to just quickly answering it because they think they know and understand the word. So make sure, notice again, here they're saying, in line 36, quickly just go back to the text, find the word, look at context clues around the word, and just make sure that you're not accidentally selecting the wrong answer, because it is important to understand how it's being used within the sentence to get the correct answer. The next type of question, number 5, is function. So oftentimes this could be, the use of a literary term or device or a rhetorical term or device, where, for instance, in this question, you can see the analogy, the comparison, in the final sentence of passage 2 has primarily which effect. So basically it's recognizing, okay, this author is using something, and then so what effect does this have on the audience, or how does it, contribute to the passage or the reading, and then you being able to understand its function within the passage or the sentence or that paragraph and what effect it has on the overall passage or even the audience. Author's technique is somewhat similar because, again, it's asking you to look at how authors like craft their writing and provide structure, and like the little details that they add in. For instance, this question here, it's pointing out that the author like shifts their focus. And so it's a question based on like shifting of ideas. So author's technique could fall into a bunch of different things. It could be like, how does the author shift their structure and why? What maybe techniques do they use for literary terms or rhetorical devices? So again, it's kind of like understanding that authors do purposeful things and make moves or have movements within their writing, and then being able to understand and recognize those. And this is all stuff that we talk about in class, right? Okay. Number 7, evidence support. So this one can be tricky. It's basically a 2-part question. So number 1 is where they ask you to answer some sort of question. And then number 2 is where you need to go back to the text and say, okay, well, what is the best evidence or best support from the text to support the answer that you gave for number 1 above? So here's the zinger on this. If you answer the wrong question, like let's say the answer is A, but you select C, guaranteed if you select C, then one of the choices below under number 2 will seem as if it is an appropriate answer that goes along with C. They do that purposely. So you have to make sure that you get the answer correct on number 1. Otherwise, you will get the answer incorrect on number 2 if you do not select the correct answer on 1. They purposely set it up so like things match on several different levels on question 1 to number 2. So you have to make sure that you answer 1 correctly to get 2. And again, this is being able to recognize something within the text, make an inference, and then be able to support it with evidence from the passage. This is a good skill, and that's what they're testing for here. The last one is data interpretation. You can be guaranteed that on 1 or 2 of the passages, there will be some sort of graph that you will need to analyze, and then there'll be questions that will go along with that graph. So anytime you do any type of like graph data interpretation in any of your classes, it's really important to pay attention and just get that practice in of constantly exposing yourself to that and practicing data interpretation. So you can be guaranteed that you will find that on the SAT test. All right, so in general, The SAT test is basically testing your reading comprehension skills and your ability to support your answers with evidence from the text. So it reveals your reading abilities, your vocabulary abilities, your critical thinking abilities. So this is a really important test to be able to do well on and display yourself as like a learner and your intellectual level. So let's talk about how to study. So many students wonder, well, what can I do to better myself and prepare for this test? So here are some suggestions. First of all, practice timed reading tests. You can actually go to the SAT reading site, the SAT College Board site, and you can find reading tests where you can get practice in. You can go to Barnes and Nobles. You can go onto Amazon and purchase actual test books where it has reading practice tests in them. Sit down with your phone and time yourself taking these tests so that you get used to working under that limit. Another thing is read daily. Read the news. Set up your phone. I've mentioned this in class. So you have a news app on your phone where you can select different news outlets and just reading widely too. Don't just read a certain type of text. Try and expose yourself to different styles and types and genres. Another thing would be brush up on your literary terms. Obviously, being in class and exposing yourself to that information, we work on literary terms is important, but we don't necessarily cover everything in class. So if you just Google search literary terms, you'd be shocked at how many different sites are designated to literary terms and providing examples. So I would say brush up on literary terms. Another thing is practice data interpretation. So just like I showed you before, that bar graph, I'm not sure that the College Board website offers this, but I mean, if you pick up any one of your science books, anytime you can expose yourself to things like infographics, bar graphs, and sort of learn how to interpret those and expose yourself to that, that would be important and helpful. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is when you actually get to the day of the test, what are some reading strategies? Because there's all kinds of, schools of thought out there how to go about actually taking the test with the 6 passages and the 52 questions, right? So let me kind of break down for you what research says about how to tackle reading and answering the questions. So, according to research, it's good practice to read the passage and then answer the questions. So, you just kind of do those in order, which we're kind of used to. That's how we do it in class. We read the passage and then we answer the questions. But, according to research, they say it's better practice on the SAT test to skim the passage and then answer the questions. And then if you're feeling a bit lost in a particular question, then you can go back to the passage, but skim the passage. Don't necessarily go into a really long drought reading cycle where you want to savor every single word, but instead skim the passage and then get to those questions. Lastly, according to research, they say the best practice is go to the questions first. So glance at those questions, then go back and read the passage, and then go back to the question. So glance at the questions, read the passage, then go back to the questions. And I'm going to give you some more tools as you view the slide to sort of help you understand maybe what is the science behind that and why you would go through and glance at questions first. So actually, you can annotate the text and even the question themselves. So you read those questions first, you might mark up the questions, and then you might go back and read the text and actually mark the text. Because if you read the questions first and then you're going back through the reading, you might realize, oh, I remember this question being in the question section, and here it's being answered right here in the passage. Let me just make a little check mark. So here are some other things you can do. If you read the questions first, you can right off the bat As you read those questions, circle any questions that are those big picture main point questions. And then what you can do is answer all those other detail, inference, function, data interpretation questions, the 7 other types of questions first, and then leave maybe the big picture questions for the very end. Typically, those seem to be slightly easier. Make sure that you read the blurb. There's an informational or situational blurb that's given before every passage. You do not want to neglect that blurb. Make sure that you read the questions, read that blurb, read the text, the passage, then go back to the questions. Next is maybe recognizing important features. As you're quickly reading through the passage, you might make a note where the introduction is at, where the claim might be. Look to the last sentence of the introduction. Is there possibly a claim or a thesis or something important in that last sentence? Look to the topic sentences. Usually the first sentence of each paragraph within the passage is raising some sort of shift in ideas, a new idea or a new topic being addressed within that passage. And then lastly, too, it's important to recognize the conclusion. Where does the conclusion start? The conclusion isn't necessarily just the last paragraph. Where does it feel like the reading is maybe starting to wrap up? And is there any important information within the conclusion? And then transitions. So transitions are important to recognize when they appear, transitional words, transitional phrases, when they appear within the text, because it could indicate a shift in or a continuation of ideas. So either it's shifting to a new idea or it's trying to continue with an idea and build on that idea. The last thing I want to talk about with you today is not just reading strategies and how you can actually annotate the work and maybe make notes on the questions themselves or the reading themselves to help things along faster, but also to talk about the mental strategy behind taking the SAT test, right? Just keep in mind that with every question, there is only one right or correct answer. And that answer is 100% correct. And you can eliminate all the other options. So 1 out of the 4 is correct, and all the other 3 options can be eliminated. So just remember, only one of the answers is 100% correct. So it's all about the mental strategy in it is about eliminating the answers or the choices that are wrong. So I want to give you this quick little list for you to keep in the back of your mind as you're taking that SAT reading test for how to eliminate or recognize answers that are incorrect and that you can eliminate. Okay, so the first type of wrong answer or choice that they will throw at you is an option that maybe has extra information or it's slightly off. So you see it and you say to yourself, well, this part is right, but this part of the answer is wrong. In that case, you can knock that option off the table, and that is not a choice. That would be an incorrect answer. The next one is, these are pretty easy, where it's the direct opposite of the correct answer. Unless, though, you completely misinterpret the text, you might choose that opposite answer. But hopefully these are pretty glaringly obvious that you would know what the right answer is. And so this is going to be the complete opposite or polar opposite of the right answer. The next type of wrong answer that they'll throw at you or choice is an answer where what is being presented is completely irrelevant, or they do what's called a concept jumble. So a concept jumble uses key words from the passage, but it doesn't really say anything that maybe relates to the question. It's just kind of a mismatch of ideas, and you might choose it just because it has some key words from the passage, but careful of that one. And the final one, and this is probably the one that you're going to be left with, where you have A, which is the right answer, and B, where you're like, oh, it could be this one, but I'm uncertain. And that's where the answer provides a plausible interpretation, but it's not technically supported by the text. So it offers a valid interpretation or perspective, let's say, a very valid perspective, but it's not supported by the text. And the other option would be supported by the text. Okay? So you just have to remember that the correct answer must typically restate something from the passage, right? And you should be able to eliminate 3 out of the 4 choices, hopefully. Okay? So, I hope that today's lecture was helpful to you for better understanding the SAT reading portion. If you need to at all, pause this PowerPoint and you can go back and preview any areas you might have missed. So I hope you enjoyed. Please make sure you're ready to present your notes in class. Thank you.